Hi, Jimmy.
Morning.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. On the beach.
I don't think so.
He is.
Hey, everybody.
Hello, good morning.
Good afternoon, or whatever it is.
Afternoon. Okay.
Yeah. So sorry. I don't know if other people had some trouble getting onto the call or not. We had. Oh, okay. You weren't. All right. Well, I'm sorry to be a little bit late. So, we are. As I think I said last time that we were going to use this opportunity to go a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
The sphere of Bina. So that's what we were studying. Oh, actually, hold on. Let's let.
Time for this. Sir.
I'm going to give people a second to come on in. Hold on. All right. Hold on one moment. I'm just going to adjust the lighting. I'm going blind with this bright window in front of me. Hold on one moment. Okay. So we welcome to Share Ora, the gates of light, and we are back in the saddle. We started last time to talk about Bina, which is the ninth sphera, counting from the bottom, which is how he, Yosef Chikatilia, approaches the enumeration of the sphirot. Again, he begins with Malchut and works his way up. And actually, you know, I realize something that's probably confusing for folks is that I keep switching in between the names that he uses and the names that they're conventionally known by. So, for example, I keep referring to Malchut as being the lowest sphera, and he does often call it that, but he introduces that sphera as Adonai, because remember that his whole project is to explain the names of God and their Kabbalistic meanings. And so when I refer to it as Malchut, it's not that helpful to you, but I'm doing it by habit. So he starts with Adonai, which is the lowest sphera. So what do I mean when I say the lowest sphera? Again, there's no real upper and lower here. These are just designations we use by convention. Hold on. By convention, so we have a way to talk about them, but there's no real physical upper or lower here. Sorry, I'm rearranging my whole setup now. One sec. So he begins with Adonai. Now, when I say it's the lowest sphera, what I mean to say there is that that sphera is the one that's sort of most, in which the divine light is most occluded, most covered up. Um, so, if we think of the first sphera as being the one in which, is pure godness. So the Keter, which is a sphere we've not studied yet, but Keter is the kind of source of everything. It's the closest to God's infinity, to the closest to Ein Sof. So in that sphere, we can't exist, because if there was just Keter, there would be no room for us. There's nothing else except divine unity. There's no you, there's no me, there's no up, there's no down. There's just unity. There's just oneness and being and stasis. And we can't even imagine what, there's no real way to talk about that, as I think I said last time. But in that space, the divine light is totally, completely revealed. And again, when I say light too is just a metaphor. It's just a way of talking about. It's not real physical light when I use the word light. But in any event, there's no differentiation. There's just total unity. Now, the divine light gets increasingly occluded as the world that we know begins to emerge, increasingly blocked. And so in the sphere of Adonai, which is still part of the divine structure, God's divine light, God's presence, God's being, God's essence is still in the world, but there's also a lot of void. There's also a lot of absence, which makes space for us, which allows us to exist. And we exist only because God's light has been restricted in some way. So we are, we started the first chapter of this book way back, months and months ago. We started with Adonai, also known as Malchut, and we kind of worked our way up. And so now we are at the sphera known as Bina. Excuse me. Yes, known as Bina. I'm sorry. I'm just looking for the Kabbalist, the tree of life diagram that I had. So anyway, did I say we're on the 9th? I actually meant to say we're on the 8th. We're on the 8th sphera, which is Bina. Now, we started talking about this last time, and what I want to continue our discussion by taking us right into some passages from his book. And so let me just get the first of those that I wanted to find, and then I'll share the screen with you. So if it looks like I'm looking away from you, it's because the bigger screen that I have is actually not the one where my camera is. And so that's why. Okay, here, let me share my screen with you. Okay, so are people able to see that? Okay, let me see if I can make it a little bigger. There is a presentation mode. That's what I want. Okay. Now, I know for some of you it might be a little bit hard to read, and so I'll read this out loud here. Make sure I've got the right one before me. This is, number 1. Okay, now, okay, so I want to start up here where he says, and we're actually in the last few pages of this chapter. So we began to talk about Bina last time. And so we're continuing, we're towards the end of the chapter here. So he says, after we've explained all of this, the previous discussion, we must make you aware of great concepts with the help of him, help of the one who enlightens the earth and those who dwell there. Okay, so he's just saying, God's going to help me explain this. Know that the sphere Binah is written Yud He Vav He and is pronounced Elohim. Okay, so Binah, which is this aspect of godliness in the world, he says in the Torah, you know it's referring to Binah when you see the letter, the four-letter name of God, Yud He Vav He, but you don't pronounce it as Yud He Vav He. You pronounce it as Elohim. Now that may sound very bizarre and strange to you, but I think, as I mentioned last time, this actually happens all the time, especially in the readings of the Haftarah. In fact, the Haftarah that I chanted so beautifully last Shabbat. I used to have a running joke with a friend of mine because whenever the rabbi would get up, he would say, in whatever shul, he would always refer to, thanks to so-and-so who just chanted so beautifully. So in the Torah portion, that so-and-so just chanted so beautifully. So anyway, in the Haftarah that I chanted this last Shabbat, you wouldn't have noted unless you were reading along with me because you just would have heard me say Elohim. But I was actually reading the letters Yud He Vav He and saying them as Elohim. So sometimes when you say sometimes when you see in the Torah Yud He Vav He, well, you tell me, how do we usually pronounce that, Yud He Vav He?
Adonai.
Yeah, we usually read it as Adonai. But in certain contexts, in particular when it follows directly after another name of God, it's read as Elohim. Okay, and that's just by convention. That's not a Kabbalistic convention. It's like everywhere, any old shul you go to, it'll be pronounced that way. And in fact, most but not all Haftarah books. So there are special books that have, for people who are reading Haftarah, which have the print very big. Most of them will put in parentheses, read this as Elohim in those circumstances. Okay, so he's saying that when you see that combination of names, you need to read it as, you need to, when you see Yud He Vav He and it is pronounced as Elohim, you need to understand that it's referring to Binah, this aspect of God, okay? So know that the sphere of Binah is written Yud He Vav He and pronounced Elohim. It is the essence of revelation of the three upper spheres by which the light of Keter and his will is revealed. So don't worry, I'm going to go back over this. Okay, this is very, very, very difficult stuff. Until the everflow reaches the sphere of Yesod, which is the essence of the seven lower spheres. Okay. It is then, and again, we'll go over this, it is then that the sphere Yesod empties all of its everflow of blessing into the attribute of Malchut, which is called Adonai. Okay, so I'm going to, what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to, do you still have that same text in front of you that you were just reading a moment ago? Okay. So I want you to just read back over that. And as you're reading that, I'm going to call up a tree of life, an Eitz Chaim, so we can get a sense of what it is that he is talking about. Okay, so now I want us to look at this. Oops. All right. Now let's just make sure you're seeing what I'm seeing. Are you seeing on the right side of the screen the tree of life?
No,
and on the left side the text?
No, just the text.
Oh, interesting. Okay, it's not letting me do that.
Just the text.
Okay, I was trying to get way more advanced than I have the capacity for.
We've got page 293.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. So in that case, then what I need to do. Okay, so now do you see the tree of life?
No.
Yep.
No.
Really?
No.
Hold on, technical difficulties. Stop share. All right, now you see the tree of life.
Yes.
Woo!
Yes.
All right, I'm sorry for the clumsiness here, my own clumsiness. Okay, so again, this is the tree of life. Now these are names these are kind of the more standard names that you see. Malchut, Yesod, Hod, Netzach, Tiferet, Gevurah, Chesed, Bina, Chochma, Keter, Ein Sof. He uses all of those, but those are not his primary ones. Because remember, he's saying that one of the names of Bina in the passage that we just read, one of the names of Bina is that it is it's when it's the Torah writes it as Yud Hey Vav Hey and you pronounce it as Elohim, but it's also known as Bina. Okay, now he's saying that what Bina does is it takes all of this divine light from the three upper sfirot, Keter, Chochma, and Bina. Okay, these three aspects of divinity that are like at the heart of the universe that we cannot see. They are not actual physical lights, right? These are just metaphors to talk about this pure divine unity that is filtering down into the world of differentiation that we work in, live in. And he says that Bina takes all of this beautiful divine blessing and life source and energy and goodness, and it pours it into the world of the rest of the Sfirot, which is where we begin to experience it, because it gets down into a realm where we can exist, where we can comprehend, where we can operate, and it pours it into Yesod. And Yesod is the aspect of the divine that channels all of that divine energy into the physical world, into the world of our experience. So Bina's job is remember last time I think I said that Bina serves as this kind of hinge is the wrong word, but Bina kind of faces two different ways, so to speak. Bina is part of the upper, the most supernal realm of divine being, but it also has, its job is to take everything that it receives and it pours it into the world. It pours it downwards, so to speak, into the world. So it becomes this sort of channel for blessing to the world. So now with that image in mind, let's go back to, I don't know, it's telling me my screen sharing is paused, which I find very unnerving, but whatever. Okay. All right, are you seeing text again?
No, not yet.
Weirdness. Okay, hold on. It
No.
wants me to stop and reshare every time I'm moving the image around. I don't know. I might need to reboot my computer, which obviously I will not do while I'm with you. Things are getting funky. Okay, so let's read that again. Know that the sphere of Bina is written Yud Hey Vav Hey and is pronounced Elohim. It is the essence of the revelation of the three upper spheres by which the light of Keter, right? And remember, we said that Keter is like almost God's infinite light. It's almost Ein Sof, it's almost infinite, but Keter is the from the top down, Keter is the first sphera. It's the most pure sphera in terms of its being filled with divine light, and maybe we can compare it to the divine will. In which the light of Keter and his will is revealed until the everflow, that is God's emanation of energy and love and blessing, reach the sphere of Yesod, which is the essence of the seven lower spheres. It is then that the sphere Yesod empties its everflow of blessing into the attribute Malchut, which is called Adonai. Okay, so all he's saying here is that Bina takes all of this divine blessing that is constantly radiating into the universe, and it is the channel by which that blessing begins to flow down into the world that we can know. That's kind of the simple way of looking at the kind of mechanical, so to speak, function of Bina. Therefore, it is called Bat Sheva. Okay, so now your reaction at this point might be, oh man, Rabbi Rose is giving me more names to remember. But the reason that I'm giving you more names, the reason he's giving us more names, is that these names will actually help us understand what Bina does, okay? So just hang in there. Okay, therefore it is called Bat Sheva. Now, when you're reading the Torah and you see Bat Sheva, what is Bat Sheva?
A name.
Bat Sheva is a name, that's all it is. It's just a name of a person,
Daughter of seven.
okay? But in the Kabbalah, there's no such thing as something that's just a name in the Torah. It always refers to some greater cosmic reality that's unfolding. Okay, so therefore it is called Bat Sheva. Okay, so he's actually saying, well, we'll read on. Meaning that the sphere that is sustained by the 7 spheres above it, which are Bina, Gedula, Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. This is the meaning of Bat Sheva and Beer Sheva. So what is Beer Sheva when you're reading the Torah? It's a place name, okay? It's a place name. Meaning the well that fills up with the 7 spheres. Thus, the essence of Beer Sheva is called the sphere Bina. For this is the source of the everflow. That is, again, God's ever-flowing energy and love and radiance when it emanates to the 7 sources below it. So, one more sentence, and then we'll circle back. This is the rule. So this is actually so great when you're reading this book, because he has these like baffling pages and pages and pages, and then he'll say something like, this is the rule. So now he's like, I'm now going to just conclude by saying in one sentence what I've been talking about for the last 50 pages. So this is the rule. Beer Sheva is the essence of Bina as the emptier of blessings to the 7 spheres below. Bat Sheva is the sphere of Malchut, when she is filled with the blessing of the 7 spheres which are above her. Okay, so now we're going to look once more at the... Now what do you see?
Text.
Ah! Okay, here we go. So annoying.
Are you going to be going into practical applications of this later?
We're gonna work our way towards that. Yes, that's what we're gonna conclude. Okay, we're moving there, but we've got to set the groundwork. I will not be giving lessons on technology and the use of your computer for Zoom meetings, but I will be talking about how Bina becomes practical. So, so what are the Sheva? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So when he talks about, so Bear, remember that Bat Sheva means literally, it's a name, but it literally means the daughter of 7. Okay, so Malchut is 1. Adonai, this is the kind of the realm in which human existence and consciousness is most readily existent. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those are the 7 lower sphirot, which is kind of more on the, which is on like the physical plane, the physical universe in which God's presence is. So the lowest sphira, one of the names, in addition to Malchut, in addition to Adonai, it is also called Bat Sheva, the daughter of 7. Why is it called daughter of 7? Well, Bina is called Be'er Sheva, the well of the 7, because it contains all of the divine energy that is then going to pour into the world. So these 7 sphirot receive the divine energy that flows into the world. Okay, so thus far, this is just sort of like the conceptual framework that he's using, and the essence of it again is that these 3 upper sphirot, which are the closest to the divine, which are most filled with divine light, and therefore don't really have any space for human existence and ego and the world of differentiation. Bina is the thing that conveys all of that pure divine unity down into the world of separation and individuation. And why that matters is going to become clear as the chapter goes on. Okay, so that's the conceptual framework. Let's go back to, okay. All right, so let me go there now. I want to look for, okay, so that's one idea that I wanted you to get. Now what do you see? Same thing, the picture?
Text.
Text, okay, good.
Text.
Good, that was the right answer, okay. One sec. Let me look at my own notes on 301. Okay, now we're going to read a separate passage. Okay. Okay. Okay, so now so Lenny asked the question, are we going to talk about practical application? So now he's going to talk about how this idea of Bina becomes relevant to how it interfaces, I should say, with our lives, okay? So he begins this discussion, and we can't go into all of it because we don't have time, but he begins this discussion about the different levels of the human soul. So are you looking at page 301? Does it say 301 here at the bottom right?
Bottom's cut off.
Oh, my Lord. Okay, hold on.
It's hard to tell. It won't raise up. So
Yeah, I can't see it.
Okay.
I can't see the bottom.
Okay. Do you see the words, the image of the sling reminds us?
And we've got this first long paragraph and it ends.
Okay, hold on. So yeah, I think what's happening, yeah, there's something wrong with my sharing function. Hold on. So I need to stop share.
We all have trouble sharing, not to worry.
Okay. Now I'm pretty sure you're looking at what I'm looking at, but I can't be sure. Okay, so now I'm on the right-hand side.
Now it says 301 at the bottom.
Great. Okay.
Yes.
Now I'm on the right-hand side. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. My computer is being very funky. Okay, so in this section, what's happening is he discusses now the various levels of the soul. Okay, so in the Kabbalah, we're not really going to go into this very much. There are various levels of the soul. And the reason that the Kabbalists talk about different levels of the soul is because one way to think of it is there are different levels of consciousness. And so, for example, generally, one of the words for soul is nephesh, which you've probably heard of. And nephesh is kind of is sort of thought of as the lowest level of the soul. The nephesh is kind of the part of the soul that we have we're most conscious of in its relationship to our body, in relationship to our ego. It's the thing that helps animate us on kind of the lowest mechanical level. So in a sense, like we live with our nephesh all of the time. In that sense, like our awareness, our ordinary awareness, and just like when we're focused on our bodies and focused on working through the world, that's like kind of the realm of nephesh. As we enter contemplation and study and learning and meditation and tefillah, we access higher levels of the soul. And what does it mean, the higher levels of the soul? As you go higher in the soul, so to speak, what you're doing is you're coming closest to the origins of the soul, which is, what's the origins of all souls? God, right? So all of our souls are rooted in the one soul of all things, which is God. But when we talk about nephesh, we're really talking about it's a soul in the sense that it's connected to God and it's gives me life, but it's the lowest level because in nephesh, I'm really focused on myself more and my body, and I'm not really connecting on a conscious level to the ways in which I'm unified with God and with you and with all beings. Those are the higher levels of the soul. Okay. So when we're in nephesh, what happens is if we're just concerned with our nephesh, we're not really ever coming out of ourselves. We're not seeking connection to other beings. We're not seeking connection to God. And that's where we get into the world of ego and division and strife and pain. And so that then becomes relevant for his discussion here. So we're going to pick up here because we're in medias res here in the middle of this discussion, but where it says, thus it is like a nephesh. So will somebody pick up here and just read for me a little bit? Thus it is like a nephesh.
You're not sharing the screen, are you?
Oh my gosh, you're so right, man. Okay, just kidding. So somebody read right here where it says, let me get us a big note here. Ugh. Now it's not. Yeah, I'm really having a computer breakdown here. It's not doing what I want it to do. Presentation. Okay, well now that's not an option. Can you see where it says thus it is like a nefesh?
Mhm.
Somebody read that if you would.
Thus it is like a nefesh, but the rest of the sentence is hidden by the pictures of the people.
The pictures of the people, my gosh.
No, no, you can, that's on your screen. You can change
Oh.
that.
Oh.
Oh.
Now I'm intrigued. Who are the people on your,
The multitudes listening to you.
yeah, right. Okay, there we go. Thus it is like a
That's
nefesh.
better. Okay. Thus it is like a nefesh, which from the time it is cut off from its place is cast from place to place into so many evil punishments, which are symbolized by the sling.
So for the moment, don't worry about the sling, because again, we're picking up in the middle of a conversation here. We're not talking about the sling. I just want to get us to where he's going. Keep going.
Okay. Through this way of thinking, we may understand the essence of teshuvah that is mentioned in the Torah, that this is the essence of the return of the nefesh to the place from which it has been uprooted, as its return to its place, as it is written, return nefesh to your resting place.
Okay, so pause there for a second. So what he's doing is he's taking a verse from the Psalms, Psalm 116:7, and he is using it to illustrate a really, really important part of the of Kabbalistic thinking, which is the following. Let me pull up that verse from Psalms really quickly. So this is like really where the rubber meets the road, whatever it does. Okay, can you see the Psalms?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the verse of Psalms that he's referring to, he wants us to use this to explore. Shuv'i nafshi lemenuchachi, ki Hashem gamal alaychi. They translate it here as be at rest once again, O my soul, for God has been good to you. But he's translating it, return, my soul. Not be at rest, but return. Because the word shuv here, shuv is multivalent, and it can mean be at rest, as in like Shabbat. It's the same root, shav, which is, I guess, what their translator is doing. But it's not. I don't think it's the best. It's not how I would have translated it. It's not how he's translating it. Shuv'i nafshi, return my soul. Okay, so now let's go back to him. Oops, one second. Sorry, guys. I'm just really struggling here. I was just telling somebody how great it is to teach by Zoom, and now I've changed my mind. Okay. Let me share it.
You need a 12 or 13-year-old to help out there. They've got all the technology. Yeah.
Okay. Tell me you see page 301.
Yay.
Yes, but it's still covered up by
Well,
pictures.
I think that's on your end. If it's covered up by photographs, that's on your end.
I don't know.
You
how
can
to-
just drag the whole thing off to the left if you need to.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Or also, if you mouse over it, there's a little bar, like a little icon bar on it. You can do that too.
Okay. So what he's saying is return nafshi, return my nefesh to your resting place, which is this beautiful poetic line in the Psalms. And just on the pshat level, it's just a gorgeous idea on the pshat, you know, that it's like you're telling your nefesh, your soul, just to rest, and you return to a place of rest, just calm down. But he's saying, no, this actually contains a much deeper meaning that is actually at the core of teshuvah. Now, teshuvah, we always translate as repentance, or conventionally it's translated as repentance. We know that it means return, but like, what does that really mean? Well, he wants to explain what it really means. So what it really means is that the nefesh has become separated from its source because it needs to be coming into you. And so when you are in a space of ego, and again, when I say ego, that's not a value judgment, right? All of us are egos. That's how you're born. You're born into the world, and you have a self, and you have a physical body, and you have an ego. That's a kind of standard operating state. But when we're in that, the nefesh, the soul that we got from God is separated, and it's been taken from its source. Its source is in God. And if we spend our whole lives in that, then we spend our whole lives separated from God. So when we elevate our consciousness and try to link it back to its source, then we are returning our soul. Return nafshi. And again, nafshi means nefesh of mine. Return my soul to your resting place. That is, to the place where you come from. Where you come from is binah, which is called teshuvah. Okay, so here the word teshuvah, in the way that he is using it, is not just a process of self-examination and making, apologizing to people and committing to changing your acts and your actions. It is all that. But the reason that's all possible, hold on now, my phone is ringing, I don't know where it is. The reason that's possible is because you're drawing on the energy of Binah. You're drawing on the divine energy almost from its very origins. So rather than being in the world of ego where you're kind of separated, you're looking for the source of who you are. You're looking the source of your nefesh, which is in God. And as he's going to tell us, that the teshuvah, which is yet another name for Binah, is this constantly flowing power in which God's goodness and radiance and blessing is constantly flowing into the world to renew you. So when you return your nefesh to its resting place, as he says, what you're doing is you're returning to your original source, to God's oneness, which is flowing into the world. So read a little more, and then we're going to pause, and we'll try to spell this, try to hammer this out a little more based on your questions. Let's see here. Okay, so now I'm on the bottom line here, bottom line of this page. It literally returns the soul. That is, the Torah literally returns the soul. It helps the nefesh return to teshuvah, return to binah, return to the ever-flowing root in the world, which is God's energy that's animating the world. When the Torah, he says, helps guide your nefesh back to that source, right? To find out, to discover. So your nefesh, left to our own devices, our nefesh, our egos. Let's, for the moment, for the purpose of this conversation, I'm going to call nefesh ego, just because it makes it easier. As we move through the world, we begin to think that we're the center of the universe, not in some grand, some sense of delusions of grandeur, but just in the sense of you're a being, and we all lie down at night and we have thoughts about what's going on in our lives, and we feel like we're alone, and we feel like the world is happening to us, and we're more concerned with our own pain and our own joy and our own ambition than anything else. It just seems to us that the world is happening to us and we're at the center of it. The Torah helps us in teshuvah, and what he means by that is the Torah helps us return to our true source and to see that way of thinking is totally false, because I'm not my own being. I'm not at the center of anything. What's at the center of anything is God's reality, and it's God that's beaming, so to speak, beaming my soul into me. God is the source of all things. So my nefesh feels separate from you, but when we all return to our root, we see that we're all made out of the same thing. And it's that binah that's radiating the souls of all people into the world simultaneously. So the Torah is our guide for returning us to binah, returning us to our source. It literally turns the soul. For if the Torah had not elucidated the ways of return, there would be no way to return, right? So if the Torah didn't tell us about binah and God's unity and everything, we would think that our whole lives are just about ego and ourselves, and we were alone. We wouldn't understand the unity of all things. So there would be no way to return. But the prophet cried, saying, ... Talk about an ellipsis. That's a serious ellipsis. Let me get my next document here. What did the prophet cry, saying? Tune in next week. No, just kidding. So the prophet says, return, O wayward sons. Shuv is the verb. We're not going to look up the Jeremiah verse. Shuv, wayward sons. And I will cure you. I will, what does that say? Cure you from your return? I'm not sure if that's actually what the Jeremiah verse says. But the essence of the verse is this. When it says return, that the root of return is shuv, as in teshuva. So according to him, Jeremiah is referring to binah. And what that means practically is, if Jeremiah were going to speak our language, so to speak, Jeremiah would say, return to God's primal unity that we can all access by elevating our consciousness to realize that we are not just individual egos cut off from our source. That's not our deepest reality. That's our starting point. Jeremiah is saying, return your soul by realizing, follow the link of consciousness, so to speak, so you understand that the source of your soul is in the one. And when you do that, then you will be healed. And that is teshuva. Teshuva is the process, ultimately, of understanding that you come from the one and that's your truest reality. Okay, let me pause there.
Can you take a brief question?
Yes, that's
just in terms, like you said, just the word, well, let me take this somewhere, but does the term Bina appear in the Torah at all? In other words, what I'm really aiming for is this whole concept of the Sephirot.
Yeah.
All of this, it's been developed independently from, it's been extracted from the Torah, but the Torah doesn't directly define this at all. Right.
Well, yes. That's actually hard to answer.
Okay.
Because so let me first give an academic answer, and then I'll give his answer. The academic answer is what an academic would say is, yeah, look, you had the Torah, and then time goes by, and you have rabbinic Judaism, and then you have this layer that develops of scholars developing a new vocabulary and reinterpreting the Torah so that they're assigning new conceptual frameworks onto the Torah and kind of like bolting it on. So they have this concept of binah, and now they're finding ways that they can connect binah to words in the Torah, right? So that's what an academic would say. It's a later grafting on. But what the Kabbalists would say is, no. This language has always been with us, but it's been handed down through illusion with an A, and in concealed ways, and by an oral tradition of interpretation that, and what Gikatilia would say is, no, the things I'm saying are really in the Torah, but only if you know how to look at the Torah in the right way. So, but to be clear, Lenny, there's nowhere in the Torah where you're going to see something that says Bina means teshuva, right? He's speaking in a completely different language, but according to him, he's actually just revealing what the Torah truly means. He's got like the decoder ring, right? And that's how the Kabbalists view it, because remember that the Kabbalists believe that all of the things I'm telling you actually come from Sinai. They were revealed at Sinai as an oral, secretive, what's the word? Esoteric tradition handed down from one generation to the next.
See, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
is that a reason why there was a ruling about not studying Kabbalah until you're 50 or something, so that people don't start interpreting their way out of meaning, you know, without knowing what they're doing?
Yeah, I do think that, because you know, as is very clear from this stuff is extremely hard to understand, right? If we really wanted to do this justice, we would probably like spend a year on each chapter,
Yeah.
right? So it can really steer you in all kinds of strange directions. I have my own theory, actually, as to why the Kabbalists were so worried about not teaching this to people who were not quite ready.
Didn't many of the great Kabbalists die at very young ages, like in their 20s?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. So when Rabbi joked is they didn't want you to study it till you were 40, because if you really understood it, you were finished
Right.
right away.
So it's interesting because I think that the rule about 40, it's not the age per se. What it really means is before you go there, you need to really create a life that is within the framework of Jewish community and of mitzvah. And you need to be completely fluent in all of the normative Jewish traditions. And
Otherwise,
once you've
you're
demonstrated,
Madonna.
what's that?
Otherwise, you're Madonna.
Actually, with the Talmud says, unless you're Madonna, in which case, you know, but no, so, you know, you need to demonstrate, you know, your total fluency in Jewish observance and your commitment to it. And only then can you begin to unveil the secrets that will demonstrate the deeper understanding and meaning of everything you're doing. And my theory, and this is, you know, worth what you're paying for it, because I haven't done any research on this, but my theory is there's something about the Kabbalah that when you learn it, you really do feel like you are getting to the essence of what the Torah is about, and a kind of like even though it's very complicated, a simplification of the Torah, in the sense that it becomes about a single idea, which is God's unity and discovering God's unity everywhere. And I think that there is a way of relating to Kabbalah that can make you feel like, well, if I have this, I actually don't need the mitzvot anymore. Right? If I really know how to contemplate God and reach God in prayer, I don't need the mitzvot. Those are just tools that I can now leave behind. And I have a theory that the rabbis were aware of that lure, of the danger, and of people walking away from the mitzvot, because they could think of the mitzvot as being as secondary or not really part of the ikar, the essence of it. But anyway, so Lenny, that's the answer, is that the Kabbalists see it as really deeply inscribed in the Torah. And what he thinks he's doing, he does not think he's giving some clever reinterpretation of the Torah. He thinks he's uncovering the inner meaning of the Torah, which has been concealed by the outer layer. And interestingly, or not just interestingly, it's very, very relevant that because then you could ask the question, well, why would it have to be so difficult? Like, why couldn't the Torah have just said, here are the sfirot, here's the deal, here's how God's unity pervades everything? And I think the answer to that is because there is, it's almost like by analogy, just as the world looks like a place of differentiation, but you have to find the hidden unity in it, so too do our texts have an outer and an inner layer. And so I think that there's something about that we model through the learning of Kabbalah, the practice that we need to move through the world in. The world doesn't appear to be about unity. The Torah doesn't appear to be about Keter Chochmah Bina. It doesn't appear to be this single story about God's unfolding unity in the universe. But if we can develop the skill for looking for unity where there appears to be differentiation, then we're equipped to go into the world and do that same thing.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, and I know that may sound totally nuts, and it may be nuts because I've been sitting alone at my desk for like months now, but there's a great book. Now I'm going to forget both the name of the book and the name of the scholar. But I'll come up with it for those who are interested on it. I can, if you follow up with me, I can email it to you. There's a scholar of Jewish thought I think he's at Chicago. And he wrote a book in which he uses the framework of Pardes. Have people heard of the framework of Pardes? Pardes means orchard, and it in the Talmud it's seen it's an acronym for Pshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod, for 4 different approaches to Torah interpretation. Pshat meaning like the basic contextual meaning of the Torah. Remez meaning allusions, which also includes gematria. The D stands for drash, which means like the midrashic approach to understanding the Torah, and then sod means the secret or the Kabbalistic meaning. And he tries to, in this book, use that as a paradigm, not just for studying texts, but for understanding reality, for saying we can move through the world with those 4 layers of consciousness. And we kind of need them all at different points of understanding our experience. So anyway, Lenny, it's a really excellent question.
I just as an analogy, it's a little bit off topic here, is you know Warren Buffett. I'm sure everybody knows who Warren Buffett is. He said when they asked how he invested or something, he said it's all just an open book. You know, I just read the SEC filings and the annual reports, and I know who's going to have money or not.
Right. He's like the Kabbalist, right?
Yeah, he's like the genius, right? He can see the next level into it. Yeah.
Right. That's right. Okay, so let's keep reading this a little bit. Okay, hold on. I got to share my screen again. Okay. You see that Jeremiah quote again at the top left?
Yeah.
Okay. Will somebody else read just so we can get someone else's voice in here? And where is the source? Okay, I will.
And where is the source? And where is the source for the idea that the essence of the sphere Bina is the essence of tshuva? It is a cornerstone for all of the Torah as it is written. And in his heart, Yavin, he will understand, same root as Bina, and return, and he will be cured.
Okay, so this is actually perfect to read following your question. So because Lenny's question was, well, does the word Bina really appear in the Torah? It does, but when you would read it in the Torah, you wouldn't know that it's talking about, that the Kabbalists think that it's talking about some larger divine force. But let's look at this verse from Isaiah. So, and in his heart, Yavin, okay, he will understand. Lahavin comes from the same root as the word Bina, right? Because Bina means understanding. Yavin is just the verbal form of that. In his heart, he will understand and return, and he will be cured. Okay, so on the Peshat reading of this verse, Isaiah is talking about a person who's maybe sinned and has gone into a world of confusion because he's forgotten the Torah, and then he'll understand that he should act in the right way, or he'll understand that God wants him to behave better, and then he will return. Like according to Isaiah, it's an intellectual process, at least it seems to be on the Peshat reading. But that is Chikatilia, is saying, no. In his heart, he will eventually reach Bina. He'll come to the level of contemplation where he understands that he is part of this larger divine unity that is the source of all things. And then he will return. That in doing that, he returns by contemplating and understanding that he comes from a single source. He has returned. That is his return. And then he will be cured. Does that make sense? You at least understand on the Peshat? Okay. And this is so, if this is so, contemplate that Teshuvah is the essence of the world to come. After we explain this profound principle, we must go back and tell you the steps to Teshuvah and their order. So actually here I'm going to pause because he goes into a different direction. So are there, I realize I only answered Lenny's question. Other questions about, you can ask Pshat, like you didn't understand anything I said, or implications, whatever you want to ask.
I'm curious about those levels of the soul that you started to talk about, because I think in my head I had always sort of put them along with the sphirot, that you know, that your
Yeah.
soul would be moving up these levels closer to God, but it seems like that's not true.
No, it is true. It is true. And in fact, there are, I have a book by Adin Steinsaltz that I thought I had with me here, but I don't. And he does a really good job of trying to explain in the most matter-of-fact way he can these different aspects of Kabbalah. And then there's this one chart I can remember seeing in his book in which he takes the different names of the soul and he aligns them to the sphirot. So the sphirot that they represent. So sometimes the Kabbalists will talk about the different names of the soul as being different sphirot. But it's not like a hard and fast rule. It's not always consistent, just because there's so many Kabbalistic authors over so many hundreds and hundreds of years.
Which book is that?
Yeah. You know, I'm a little concerned about over the last 48 hours, I keep forgetting things. But so now I want to get you this book from the University of Chicago, Pardes, and then also the.
I just want to bring up one thing kind of a little bit that not to answer now,
Yeah.
but in that text he said, in the world to come. And I don't really understand what he's referring to, but I don't think that's a separate topic in itself.
Well, I mean, it's separate insofar as we are somewhat having arbitrarily in this class, just out of the need to limit our discussion a little bit. It's
Right.
separate in that sense. It's actually very, very important. I'm not 100% sure I know what he means by the world to come, except what I think he means is God is constantly breathing the future into the world, so to speak. Like whatever's unfolding now is well, I'm going to hold off because I don't have a good way to explain it. So,
someone just said it's not like I heard a rabbi say it's not the Christian concept of the next of an afterlife, but it's the world that's coming at you. Like the world to come is the world
that's actually right. The world that's coming at you. That's exactly what I was. I didn't have a way to say that. That's a great way to say it. So was somebody else just jumping in there? Okay. Yeah, the world that's coming at you. I think that's exactly right. So in a sense, it's like the world to come is the world of the now, of the immediate now, of the presence. But I mean, I should be careful in saying that because it's not. The world to come has is used in so many different ways by the rabbinic tradition, and but I think what you just said is a beautiful way to describe the kind of Kabbalistic meaning as we often have it.
I think of the world to come as the world of returning, that we've reclaimed the initial unity, and that would be the world to come.
Right, beautiful. Right,
Okay.
right, and in that sense, so actually what's nice to connect these two thoughts, the world that's coming at you and what you just said, is that in that sense, like the world to come is always really a possibility in every moment. It's not some distant dream like we have to wait for it to arrive. In the sense, it's like if we can all elevate our consciousness and appreciate the unity that is always unchangingly there, boom, we're in the world to come. But instead, we're in this world of illusion where we don't see the unity of all things. We see our nefesh, we see the world of ego, the world of separation and division around us, and we don't realize that it's all coming at us from a single source. Now, to bring it back to this chapter, that single source is Bina. Bina is not the original source, right? The original source is Keter, but Bina is the word that the Kabbalists use for that divine force that takes that unity and begins to like breathe it into our world. So it begins to kind of rain down. And that's why it's called Be'er Sheva, the well of seven, because it's the original well, which is then being poured into the world. So if you want to, Abby, I'll get you in 1 second. If you're looking at a well or let's say Be'er Sheva is let's call it a spring. It's better to call it a spring than to call it a well. If you think of a spring and you think of Bina as the spring itself is not the source of all water, right? The source of all water is, I don't know, what is the source of all water? The heavens, where the rain comes down. But the spring is this like ever-flowing source that's taking the original source of the water and making it available to us. And so it's called Beersheba, the spring of the seven, because it's watering it's where God's primal unity begins to flow into our lives in a way that we can access. And if we can get back to the spring, we can always be drinking. We can always be drinking fresh water. But instead, we spend our time kind of like wandering around the foothills. We don't find any water. We're miserable, and we're completely cut off from our source. Okay, Abby.
Well, one of the, as you were talking, I was thinking of the 100 pools between where we are and the Holy Oneness, that teaching about that we say 100 blessings each day to unite the whole tree of life and that flowing of the water that comes through. And that's really beautiful. So one of the things that I love that ties into what you're talking about is that right between Bina and Hakma and the 7 daughters, that's the veil. That's the place that we definitely can't go to. Like Moshe went all the way up to the throne, which was at the edge of that veil. And so it seems to me like Bina is this really generous Sphirot that takes all of blessing and kind of holds it, just kind of makes it so that we can experience it. And that sharing is the water that comes through. That Bina, the womb, makes it so that we can have access to beyond the veil, in a way that fits us, that we can understand, that we can watch for the blessings and the angels and everything that's on, next to those realms, and be guided back up.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Right. So for a comment about your comment, and then I wanted to spell out what you're saying. The comment about your comment is that, so you referred to Bina as womb, you referred to the veil. There are so many different metaphors. So I'm addressing the class now. There's so many different metaphors that the Kabbalists use to try to give us understanding. So it can be very, very confusing. But Abby's just referred to 2 different metaphors that the Kabbalists use to try to articulate the special power of Bina. And the idea now of Bina being something that gives us access behind the veil, right? These upper Sphirot, Chochmah and Keter, are really beyond, we don't have a connection to them. They're just too pure in their unity. And because we are by our nature differentiated in the world of ego, at some point there's just an upper limit to what we can connect to while we're living. Bina lets us see behind the veil. I love how you put that, because it is connected to those infinite sources, but that beautiful generosity, as you put it, allows us to kind of tap into it. So Bina is like really the place where in the lower world, the world of differentiation, we can actually access it. And that, again, that's why I think the power of the Beersheba, of the spring, because that image of like when you lean down, have you ever been to like a pure spring of living water, like deep in the forest, and you have that incredible sense of being refreshed by this ever-flowing stream. And again, the spring is not the source of all things. It's just a channel for something that it's been gifted from above, but it makes it accessible to us. So that's very nice. Okay, I think we have time for one other mind-blowing paragraph, and then we're not going to quite get to everything I wanted to, but we can maybe finish up Bina next time, or if we want to dwell on it more, we will. Okay, what are we on, 4? Yeah. Okay, are you seeing text again?
Yes.
All right.
Yep.
By the way, this is actually a cool, like maybe the Zoom has something to teach us in a kind of Musardic kind of way. imagine if every time you were talking with somebody, you had to ask them like, are you seeing what I'm saying? Like, you know, are we agreeing on the reality that's in front of us? It's maybe good practice. Anyway, okay, so now we're gonna start right here. Whoops, let me do this again. Okay. So now he's gonna, let's see, what did I do? He's gonna give us another word. So we're gonna start right in the middle of this page. He's gonna give us another name. Somebody want to read where it says this sphere is called by Kabbalists right here?
Yeah, I will. This sphere is called by Kabbalists Makor HaChaim, source of life, for it draws from the realm of mercy the ever flow of life and bestows it upon all creatures.
Okay, pause there for a second. So the sphere, and again, I probably should have said this at the beginning. This translation uses the word sphere instead of sphera, which I really don't like, because when you think of a sphere, you think of like a basketball or a globe, and just it's guiding your mind to put a physical image on something that it should not be understood that way. But anyway, so it is called Makor HaChaim. Makor means source, and HaChaim means life. So the Makor of life, the source of life, because it draws from the realm of mercy. Now, why is it the realm of mercy? So as he's going to talk about in the next chapter, Chokhmah is this like sort of potential divine energy that's within all creation. And it's associated with mercy, because the closer we get to the divine unity, it's important for us to know that the Kabbalists don't talk about it in a kind of value neutral way. It's not that once you get to the ultimate reality, it's not that you're in this realm of nothingness with kind of total value neutrality. God created the world in mercy, the Kabbalists say. The Torah says God created the world in kindness and in mercy. And the Kabbalists want us to know that from a Kabbalistic perspective, the tapping into the root of all things is not neutral. The root of all creation is mercy. God wants, according to the Kabbalah, God wants there to be enjoyment. God wants there to be forgiveness. God wants there to be togetherness. And it's mercy, because whenever we turn away from God and get lost in the world of ego, it's mercy because, there's mercy there because there's always the possibility of teshuvah, because of the nature of the world, right? Because God is the reality that's always coming at you, as Lenny said. It's unceasing, and therefore there's always something to bring you back home, so to speak. And that's why the Kabbalists talk about it as mercy, right? So it draws from the realm of mercy, the ever flow of life, and it bestows it upon all creatures. Okay, keep going.
Because it is the source of life, the sphere Tiferet is called the tree of life, meaning that the tree draws life from the highest source. For the tree of life was inside the garden, the middle line, which empties life into the sphere Yesod, and is called El Chai, and it's also called Elohim Chaim, as we have explained.
Okay, so this is not great teaching practice, but because we don't have a lot of time, I'm going to just, for right now, just tell you to sort of forget the latter half of that sentence, and maybe we'll pick up there next time. But just so you know, when he refers to Yesod and El Chai and Elohim Chaim, he's referring to earlier chapters where he's made clear what those names mean. What I want to focus on is that, remember that Tiferet is in the middle of the entire spherotic system. And I will just remind you of that by doing this. Hold on. One sec. Okay, so here's Tiferet. really at the heart of all being, at the heart of the created world is Tiferet. And Tiferet is sort of this harmony. Tiferet is this power, the divine power that properly balances and harmonizes all of the different divine forces so that there can be life sustained in the universe. Okay, so we very much associate Tiferet with just the being at the heart of the created world, right? So Tiferet does not exist up here. It doesn't exist in the supernal realm. There was no need for Tiferet until there was going to be a world that was going to be created. But at the heart of the world and of all things is Tiferet, this beautiful harmony that keeps everything together and keeps the world balanced and functioning properly. And it is called, the Tiferet is one of the names for it, is the tree of life. Okay, Tiferet is called tree of life. And of course, therefore, what is it that gives life to the tree of life? What is it, the source that allows the tree of reality to grow? It is the Makor HaChaim, the source or the spring of all life. The tree has to be watered, and a tree not watered from the ground by a person, but in order for a tree to like grow in a forest, it means there's water underneath the soil, that spring that is constantly allowing things to grow in it. And the reason that there is a world, the reason that there's a world that has beauty and harmony and goodness within it, is because it's constantly being drawing on the divine goodness that's within the world, and that Bina is where it gets it. So Bina is called Makor HaChaim because that's the place where God's supernal, always coming at you life flows into the world. So let me zoom out, and then I guess we'll continue with Bina next time. I'm going to zoom out by saying that one of the main points that I want you to get from today's discussion is the association of Bina with Teshuvah, okay? And because this gives us a way to think about Teshuvah, which is such a central part of our lives as Jews. And even though it's only May, we are aware that the high holidays are not quite around the corner, but we're being guided by our liturgy already towards the high holidays. How is that? Well, between Passover and Rosh Hashanah, we study Pirkei Avot. So every Shabbos, there's this tradition of studying Pirkei Avot, which is wisdom literature. The point being that as soon as Passover falls, we're already like turning our minds a little bit towards Rosh Hashanah. So anyway, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, these are times of Teshuvah. Of course, every moment is rich with the possibility of Teshuvah. But he gives us a way of understanding Teshuvah that is not about slapping ourselves on the wrists. It's not just about making a catalog of good deeds and bad deeds and then trying to own the bad deeds, right? That's I think, not a level of Teshuvah that's going to grab us and has the potential to transform our lives. It's important. We got to do that stuff. But what's the core of it? What is the thing that's going to enable you to actually feel connected to other people and to actually be a source of life for other people and for yourself? It's by understanding that what Teshuvah really is returning to the primal unity that underlies all things, right? When we remember that in the world of my ego, I'm not complete. That the world of my ego, when it appears to be self-sustaining, it's a world of illusion. That what's at the root of who I am is the root of, if you look at all the different screens, all the different squares on your screen, everybody here looks separate. But if we had an app that like showed where our souls are emanating from right now, they would all point to a single source in Bina that would connect all of these individual screens. Bina which is flowing that water into all of us right now. And eventually the water becomes so distant from its source that we feel like we're separate. But the process of Teshuvah is following the stream of water back to its source and seeing that actually we're part of a unity. That's what teshuvah is. And so I would actually reverse the way we usually talk about teshuvah. We talk about teshuvah as I said, this process of cataloging good deeds, bad deeds, and making apologies, And then maybe on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we have some intense prayer experience. We realize we're unified with God. I actually think that well, I don't want to say a better way to do it, because any way you could do it is great. But a different way to think about it is to first approach teshuvah through the Kabbalistic lens. First, try to trace your own stream of water back to its source in all things and realize it's part of a unity. Once you really can taste that, once we can really connect ourselves to all others, then automatically we're going to do the kind of more mechanical teshuvah, right? Once you see your deep and profound connection to all beings and to one another, and once you see the divine love that's uniting all beings, of course you're going to want to reach out to the people you have hurt. Of course you're going to want to change your deeds. Of course you're going to want to redirect. Of course you're going to be less involved in ego and ambition and division and animosity. And so it's just a different way to think about the process of teshuvah. And that's all I got. Closing questions, comments?
Just a technical question. The eighth gate, is that the name of the book or the name of the chapter?
That's the name of this chapter.
What's the name of the book?
The book is called Sharei Ora, Gates of Light.
Thank you. I came in a little late, I guess.
It's okay. Yep.
Question?
Yep.
Our next meeting is actually Memorial Day.
Oh.
I have no plans to be out of town, but I just want to know.
I don't either. Yeah, I think that's, well, what do people think? Is it cool to have class on that day?
Yes,
All
definitely.
days are the same.
Fine with me too.
It's fine.
Okay. Yeah,
Why
I have
not?
a 7-hour opening that day.
yeah, I think that works for me as well. So
It's not like we can really go anywhere, so.
right. Yeah,
Well,
true.
go to my
True.
porch and
Yeah,
put my
exactly.
All right, everybody, be well. Take care.
Yeah, thank you so
Take
much.
care.
Bye-bye.